Hey witches and bitches, it's Piper. So, a little known fact about me, I have been kicked out of 3 schools. Today we're only talking about one of those though. The short version is, educational institutions kept the binds on me tight, but not tight enough. All efforts to make me a good Christian girl just plunged me deeper and deeper into my destiny to become a pansexual, gender-fluid, polyamorous feminist who practices witchcraft and poses nude on OnlyFans. Actually, I'm not even kidding anymore. That's exactly what I became, like, word for word. Anyway, this story starts out sad, by the way, but if you stick around to the end, it gets better. So, the long version is, when I was 10, my life was a whirlwind of changes I could not cope with. Not only was I about to enter middle school for the first time, yes, at 10, my parents accidentally sent me to school a year early because they were stupid, and so was my principal, who also, unfortunately, happened to be my next-door neighbor and knew me personally and knew I had an abnormal IQ. F***ers. Anyway, not only was I a 10-year-old in middle school, my parents were divorcing and decided to separate me from all of my friends by sending me away to a Christian private school. Yes, they really thought putting all that on me at once was a good idea for their undiagnosed autistic but still very obviously change-resistant 10-year-old's mental health. So, like most autistic people, I was a really awkward kid. I had this white Persian cat named Blizzard who I adored, and my mom never made time to brush him, and I didn't know cats needed to be brushed, no one told me, and as a result, my school uniform was covered in so many layers of cat hair that it was impossible to remove it. I was also, like, super skinny, and I know everyone thinks I'm skinny now, but I was so skinny back then, and my mom wouldn't buy a uniform that was my size because she went off age instead, and when they came in the wrong size, she just made me wear them anyway. So my hairy ass uniform, it hung off me like I was just a clothes rack. So basically, I was sad, I was short, I was covered in cat hair, I was undernourished, I was insecure, I was born a freckly ginger, I was not cute at all, and I had become the target of bullying very quickly. I never did manage to fit in with those wealthy snots. Spoiler alert, I couldn't do it. Especially since, again, I was sent to school a year early, so I was behind all my peers developmentally. Everyone else was going through puberty, and I was not. I was probably about twice as smart as them, but with my ADHD, I didn't outperform anyone in class. I was a B student, and my mother wanted an A student. Now, I did tell my parents I was being bullied by the 3rd day of school, but they didn't believe me. Because I guess my tears were not convincing enough. Or maybe they did believe me and they didn't care. At one point they did finally believe me, but my mom said it didn't matter because I would be bullied anywhere I went as if I was the problem and not those snotty cookie-cutter rich kids. The only person who believed me from the beginning was my teacher, and I mean, how could she not believe me when she found me stuck on the rope climbing thing while a bunch of boys were laughing at me and kicking me, but whatever, MBD. I got a lot of nice nicknames like Devil, Psycho, Annoying, and of course the classic, Freak. And of course, being autistic, I couldn't really figure out my peers or their motives or anything like that, so that led to me trying my damnedest to please all the people who were bullying me, just in case one of them would finally stop being mean and decide to be my friend instead. It was years before I figured out that the girl who always asked me to sing some ridiculous song I made up or do some other odd behavior that was typical of me but made no sense to neurotypicals, well, she wasn't being nice, she was making fun of me too. I just didn't understand people, you know. I still interacted with my peers because my family pressured me, saying the reason I had no friends was just because I wasn't trying hard enough. And of course, so I'd just try harder and harder, and that always made it worse because I got the reputation for being persistent and annoying and not getting the memo that nobody wanted me around. The pressure really got to me in the 7th grade, so 1 year later, when we started using our lockers and walking from class to class. Our lockers were about half the width of normal lockers, meaning we all had to crowd around together to get our things. Well, I never figured out how to use a padlock, and I was too scared to get close to all those kids who were bullying me, so I ended up carrying all my books in my backpack everywhere I went, every single one of them. So within a year, I had really bad scoliosis, and my parents never got me a back brace to correct the problem, so it kept getting worse, and if you look at me carefully in videos I appear on camera, you can see that one of my shoulders is higher than the other. Well, the lower one, that's the shoulder I carried my backpack on, and the straps of the backpack were too uncomfortable for me to wear on both arms because, well, you know, it was full of like 10 books. So, there we go. Bullying builds character, my f***ing ass. It left me permanently disfigured. I also have IBS, the constipation type, and my sigmoid colon, if I pronounce that wrong, I'm sorry, puts pressure on my twisted out of shape lower spine. So every time I have to shit, which is almost always, I have searing back pain, and add that to my vaginal walls swelling during my period and adding even more pressure to my lower back. So if you're wondering why I always sound angry, it's because I feel like my back is going to explode. That's why. Because my parents wouldn't listen to me back when I was 10. Anyhoodle. Every day I begged them to take me out of the school, but they refused, telling me that it didn't matter if I had any friends or not. It didn't matter if people were mean to me, because if I went to a public school, I would be around too many non-Christians. And of course, since I preferred to wear male clothes and liked pretty girls, I was well on the path to becoming a pansexual, gender-fluid, polyamorous feminist who practices witchcraft and poses nude on OnlyFans, their worst fear. Wouldn't it be disastrous for my mental health if they just let me be myself or something? Speaking of my mental health, I developed serious control issues, as I'm sure you can imagine, since I had no control over my environment or, well, anything at all, really, including my clothes and hair, just a basic ability of being me because my clothes and hair were property of them. I developed two main coping mechanisms. The first wasn't bad at all. The first one was my art, and as you can see, that worked out for me pretty well. Now, the other was controlling what I ate, and that did not work out very well for me, seeing as how I developed a full-blown eating disorder, anorexia nervosa, and even though I have recovered physically since then, I still haven't fully recovered from the anorexic way of thinking. So, let's take a break from all this depressing garbage to talk about something great, like this video's sponsor, Skillshare. I would not have been able to get through this hard time in my life without my art. It was truly the silver lining that came out of this, and the private school I was attending had no art classes, but I was able to teach it to myself. But I know I would have learned a lot faster with some guidance, and I can tell you from experience, being self-taught is very overrated. So instead, I recommend being self-motivated and joining Skillshare, an online learning community with thousands of inspiring classes on topics like drawing, photography, creative writing, and music, as well as more niche things surrounding productivity, lifestyle, and freelance marketing skills. Skillshare is curated for learning, and there are no ads like here on YouTube, just a burgeoning pool of awesome classes taught by experts. And unlike art school, it won't put you into debt forever, as it is less than $10 a month with an annual subscription. It is truly the best place to develop your current skills or even pick up a new passion. Something you've always wanted to try, you know? Professional graphic novelist Ira Marks teaches a great class, Illustration by Design, a guide to elevating your drawing skills. He teaches you how to apply design skills to illustration to create illustrations that are creative and engaging. It is a must for those who are interested in conveying visual storytelling with their art. He goes over pretty much everything: how to plan a composition, create line art, how to use negative space, etc., etc. And there are tons more great classes like these on Skillshare. The first 1,000 of my subscribers to click the link on the description will get a free trial of premium membership so you can explore your creativity. I hope you enjoy your Skillshare subscription as much as I enjoy mine. Let's continue with the story time. Around 8th grade, the bullying calmed down for reasons I'm not quite sure of. Just kidding. I know exactly why now. Just not then. Not even anorexia could stop puberty from transforming me from an awkward ginger to a hot redhead, and boys started to realize that bullying me would not get me in their bed. I also stopped trying to become friends with people, and instead I focused on my art, and only my art. So, not only was I a pretty good artist for my age, but I stopped giving them attention and caring what they thought. So bullying me, it just wasn't fun anymore, because I didn't react to them the way I did before. Now, that's not to say they liked me. As a matter of fact, the girls in my class probably hated me even more than before because I was so much skinnier and prettier than them, and boys liked me. Karma's a bitch, I guess. Well, around 9th grade, I started making some friends, finally. I mean, not close friends, but people I could talk to at lunch, at least, you know, lunchbox friends, in other words. Now, where did I find these lunchbox friends, you ask, among the people who bullied me? Well, I didn't. I found them in the grade level below me, aka the kids who were my age and in the class I was supposed to be in, and the one I would have been in if my parents knew how to fucking count and didn't send me, a 4-year-old me, to kindergarten. Anyway, I had some friends finally, lunchbox friends, whatever, but I still had a hard time getting along with my peers. We were all just so different, and by that I mean they were rich and I wasn't. We came from different worlds. I just did not belong there. Not to mention, I had to listen to everyone complain about gay people, and I was pretty damn sure I was bisexual, so that didn't help my self-esteem at all. I also developed a special interest in the goth subculture, which has been near and dear to my heart ever since, and no one understood that, least of all my parents. One day, at the age of 15, I was just sick of it. I was the quiet kid who took a lot of shit without reacting at that point, but I just couldn't stand anymore after this. Okay, so I couldn't find my textbook for Bible class, and when it finally turned up, there were boogers all over the front cover. Some of the boys in my class were looking over at me and laughing, and well, it had been a while since I was the direct target of obvious bullying like that. It was just the last straw, you know what I mean? And I was randomly filled with this burst of initiative energy that I now realize was a hypomanic cycle. I wouldn't be diagnosed with bipolar disorder for a few years yet, but by then it was in full swing. I figured if my parents wouldn't let me leave, I'd get out of there myself. So I threw my snot-covered textbook in the trash, and I resolved that I wouldn't need it anymore because I would not spend another semester in private school. So I took my copy of the school rule book and I read and read. I had a lot of options. I could get kicked out by spending the night at a boy's house, but I was shy, so that was off the table. I could just go be gay, but they'd probably have tried to exorcise me or send me to some kind of conversion therapy or something, and I also was not sure how my parents would react. I knew my mother would be very displeased with it, especially. And not to mention, an expulsion would be on my permanent record forever. But then I found it. The perfect loophole. The school rulebook forbade boys from having long hair, but it had no clear set rule about what color you dyed your hair. So they couldn't very well expel me for dyeing my hair manic panic red, but I knew they wouldn't be happy. Now, I knew there would be consequences, of course, and I didn't know how, but I knew I would get out of those consequences and out of that school at the same time. So I begged my father to take me to Hot Topic, and they were out of red, unfortunately, so I gave up. No, just kidding. I picked up a bottle of bleach and what I thought was purple, but then I stepped out of the Hot Topic darkness and into the fluorescent mall lights, and I saw that it was actually blue. The school color, that shade of blue, and I thought, perfect, love a good dose of irony. So I didn't take it back. I was like, this is it, I'm gonna have blue hair. So I went to my grandmother's, far out of reach of my mother, who I knew would murder me if she caught me doing this, and my grandmother helped me dye my hair blue. I gave myself a full-on baby bat goth makeover, actually. It was awesome. It was everything I wasn't allowed to do my whole life. It was very cathartic, you know, because I wasn't allowed to experiment with my style, buy my own clothes, pick my own clothes, change my hair, that sort of thing. My mom was mad, but I didn't care, because how can you care about anything when you have blue hair in 2006, man? If you had blue hair in 2006, you were the coolest person on earth, no matter how knobby and freckly your knees were. Now, I couldn't come to school dressed goth because uniform, but I proudly walked to school with my blue hair. The first person who saw me getting out of the car was the principal. He looked at me and gasped, and I just said, "What?" and walked past him and into the school. So they called my grandmother, who was the one paying for my education, by the way, and asked her if she knew about my blue hair. And you know what she said? Of course she knew my hair was blue. She was the one who dyed it that color. And they told her I was in trouble, but she pointed out, actually the school rulebook doesn't say anything about blue hair. Checkmate. So my peers and the teachers all reacted very strongly to my decision. There were a good number of people with the "what is wrong with you" reaction. Why did you do that to yourself? And rumors started to circulate that I was a Satanist, but I didn't care about that. A few days later, though, I was called in to the vice principal's office. I had a feeling it was to do with my hair, but nothing could have prepared me for what the vice principal told me. He always had a soft spot for me, you see, because he knew I was a bad kid, just some quiet kid who kept to themselves and drew a lot. But he was concerned about rumors that I was not only a Satanist, but planned on killing masses of students and teachers. I'm not kidding. All I did was dye my hair blue, and all of a sudden they thought I was going to be a school shooter before that sort of thing was even really a thing. Like, again, this was 2006. It wasn't like it is today. There were no metal detectors in schools. There wasn't a school shooting on the news every other week. It was nothing like it is today. I just did one thing to stand out a little too much in a conservative Southern Baptist school full of preppy rich kids, and all of a sudden, I'm a monster. Well, long story short, I wasn't expelled. I didn't break any rules, technically. so they couldn't put a mark on my permanent record, but I definitely did not belong at their good Christian school. So it was sort of a de facto expulsion, you know? Like I was just unofficially kicked out. They didn't want me there, I was not welcome there. So my parents begrudgingly gave up and they sent me to a public school. And they also sent me to the one I wanted. So instead of going to the one in my crappy school district, I pretended to live with my father instead of my mother, and I got to go to the nice school in the neighboring district that had like 10 different art classes. So hooray, fraud! It turns out crime is the answer. That's what I learned from this. Crime is the answer. And it gets better, actually. At my new school, I had an entirely different reputation from the get-go, because I wasn't just some awkward, shy kid whose uniform fit them like a parachute. I was the quiet kid who wore all black and got kicked out of a Christian school. So I didn't get f***ed with nearly as badly. I was suddenly a mysterious, cool, aloof artist, and finally... At least that's what they thought, you know. I was still the same on the inside, but anyway, for the first time in many, many years, I finally made some actual friends who understood me. And while none of those friendships lasted into adulthood, it was really important for my development. You know, I learned how to socialize a lot better, and finally in my mid-teenage years, so a little late, but whatever. And while everything was still really confusing, it wasn't quite as painful. Unfortunately, my scoliosis continued to worsen, as did my eating disorder, and since I was always skinny, no one noticed, because I didn't really lose any weight per se. I just hit puberty without gaining weight. But hey, better than suffering alone in that so-called Christian hellhole. So I guess the moral of the story is, let your weird, autistic, queer female son just be themselves, and don't send them to school with a bunch of snotty rich kids and then turn around and blame them for getting bullied. The end. Support me on Patreon to see all of my videos at least a day early, and see my art in HD the moment it's finished, and as always, please rate, subscribe, and blessed be motherfuckers.